Police Minister Bheki Cele has revealed in a written parliamentary reply that more than 5,000 people have died during mass murders from 2019 to December last year, and that the figures seem to be increasing every financial year. KwaZulu-Natal and Gauteng, respectively, reported most of such mass murders. On Sunday, 6 people were shot and killed in uMbumbulu, south of Durban. This comes after 5 murder suspects were killed in a shootout with police at a flat in Durban on Saturday. Now, to discuss the drivers behind gun violence, we are now joined via Zoom by Professor Nirmala Gopal, a criminologist from the University of KwaZulu-Natal. Prof, thank you so much for your time this afternoon. Now, the last few weeks have seen so much bloodshed following gun violence in KwaZulu-Natal specifically. In fact, every day, what do you think are some of the drivers of gun violence in this country?
Good afternoon, Unachi, and to your viewers. Yeah, I think first of all, we must all, in the harshest terms, condemn this gun violence that we are experiencing, the large scale of gun violence that we are experiencing in South Africa. So if we had to look at the drivers, and I think one of the biggest drivers to gun violence is the fact that we have easy access to illegal guns. You would have noted that in the most recent apprehension and shootout between SAPs and the perpetrators, that there were types of guns that are, not just illegal, but they were really dangerous weapons for citizens to be walking around with them. So the biggest driver is the easy access to guns.
And I mean, it is concerning what we just heard now from the Police Minister, Bheki Cele, saying that there's been 5,000 people have died, during mass murders from 2019 to December. But what is concerning, of course, he says that these figures seem to be increasing. And of course, according to Gun Free South Africa, gun violence particularly has become the leading cause of violent crimes in this country. So what role then, can the police play in terms of ensuring that the accessibility, first of all, of guns is not so? And in fact, maybe by extension, government, not the SAPS only.
So yeah, I think that's a really important question, Onachi, and I like the fact that you contextualized it within the role of government, not just the SAPS, because really when we think about guns and violence and crime in South Africa, it is so important to have an integrated approach to reducing, eliminating or preventing these kinds of crimes from taking place. So I want to quickly go back to what you said earlier in terms of how the numbers of, murders through guns has increased and could increase even further. I think that is really such a worrying figure and worrying phenomenon for the country, because one of my greatest worries as an academic, as a researcher, as a community member, is how the gun violence impacts communities. How does it disproportionately impact certain communities as well? So what can we do? I think as an integrated system, or as part of an integrated grouping, look at border control. What's happening at the borders? Are we bringing in guns? Are guns being smuggled in through borders? What's happening in the military? Are some of the military guns being smuggled into communities, for example? Let's look at the harbors. Are we getting guns coming in through the harbors? So these are the various high-risk zones that we should actually interrogate to find out what is actually happening in terms of entry into the country in as far as guns are concerned, especially the illegal guns.
Prof, I want to just go back to what you said in as far as, how this affects communities. So speak to us then about what are the consequences of gun violence. I mean, this obviously extends much broader than just the people that are responsible with these mass shootings.
No, absolutely. So in the first instance, the threat of violence and gun violence in this particular instance threatens the human right of people And, South Africa is so focused on human rights. So it threatens the human rights of our citizens. But in addition to that, it has a huge psychological effect on communities, on victims, on families of victims, on perpetrators themselves, on families of perpetrators, of witnesses, of families of witnesses. So psychologically, they can be affected in the sense that they don't want to, they could become depressed, for example. They may not want to go to work because they are feeling unsafe all the time. Viewing and seeing and being part of a community where guns, illegal guns especially, are commonplace, can really demobilize and debilitate people from their day-to-day activities. And the ripple effect to that is that it will have socioeconomic consequences as well. And I think that for us is really a huge concern in South Africa.
I mean, I've quoted, stats from Gun Free South Africa earlier on. When we look at those numbers, from 2016 to 2021, there was a 54.8% increase, in the number of people killed or who suffered gun-related injuries. Can we isolate these incidences only to gang-related violence from the taxi industry and of late in KZN, from drug-related incidences?
So, again, I think the really important point of conversation, earlier you said that the minister had released these statistics, and I think what we should have had for accompany those statistics are the context. What are the profile of the people who are victims? What are the profiles of the perpetrators, the age, the gender, the nationality, etc.? And I think if we have those kinds of contextual factors, it would become perhaps easier then to have an intervention program or strategy. And in the absence of that, it just becomes really difficult to have a focused intervention strategy. So the context becomes really critical. And as far as, part of that context means knowing whether these are gang-related, drug-related, taxi-related, business-related, domestic violence-related. I think disaggregating those contexts are really crucial and critical if we want a focused intervention.
Prof, let's leave it here for now. Thank you so much for your time and your analysis. Really do appreciate it. Professor Nirmala Gopal, a criminologist from the University of KwaZulu-Natal there.